Okay, so thank you everyone that is here for this session. My name is Cecilia Utas, and I am the lead for this new initiative, the Joint Analysis Workspace. And with me today, I have Anna Maria from OCHA that is working with the JIAF, the Joint Intersectoral Analytical Framework, and also Kashif Nadim from OCHA, and Nayid Orozco from DFS, that is a part of the DEEP team that is the implementing partner of the Joint Analysis Workspace. So basically today we are going to look at what JAWS and JIAF together will be. That's basically will be, the JIAF will be a use case that will be implemented into the Joint Analysis Workspace. So today we will have a briefing more, and then we will have the possibility at the end, of course, to have a bit of question and answers. And then during next week, we have another session on Tuesday at 2 o'clock, where it will be a more interactive, where we also will be able to start sharing the beginning of this platform, yet to be. So the first prototype and wireframes, etc., so get a feeling of how it would be possible to actually starting to work with the platform itself. So you're most welcome to that session as well. But basically, JAWS, as you can see here, is a DEEP initiative. So DEEP is, most of you will probably be aware of that. It's the Data Entry and Exploration Platform, which is an open source initiative. And that with all of the organization that you see at the bottom being behind that, and is the governance board to DEEP. And there we have DRC, that is an administrative host for the DEEP. And then as well, Data Friendly Space being the technical lead. So basically that DEEP, as most of you probably would know, is a platform that is supporting collaborative human structured data. So what's basically to advancing it to integrate also quantitative data, but particular as well expert judgment. So that's what we want to manage to establish in the Joint Analysis Workspace. What it then will help us to do is basically then to collate the information, prepare and access to data in a fast, efficient way, qualitative and quantitative data. And then, of course, supporting the visualization of that as to be able then to take it forward in a guided analytical process. Here, we would like to go from data to insights. And of course, doing that, we want to ensure analytical rigor and reproducibility and also transparency in the process in that sense. And as I was mentioning as well, that we will ensuring that we also be able to elicit expert inputs, being the expert opinions, subjective information that's coming in, informing our analysis, or being it in a more structured approach, using structured expert judgment, for example, as supporting forecasting. And all of this will then be in an audited process, where all of the analytical tasks, inputs and participation will then be logged. So it will be an audit trail that will help to understanding the conclusions and the confidence in the conclusions that we have on the platform. So having said that, of course, this system that we are building is basically for the humanitarian system, but also broader to that. We will also invite development actors and others as to be able to utilize the platform. It will be similar to DEEP in the sense that it's both going to be open and flexible, agile, and also collaborative. So those are the three kind of principles that we want to maintain into this platform. So that means that we can have a number of different type of use cases where you have a different type of structure for your analysis that then is brought forward, but at the same time, you could also then work with the others. So the background of how we are kind of foreseeing that this will be working is basically that we have this workspace that is kind of the heart of the Joint Analysis Workspace itself, where we are doing those actions we talked about. We can see the data, we can go through the guided flow, we have the audit trail and also analytical scores. That will then be underpinned by a data lake that then will be able to absorb and integrate the data sets and merge and mesh them, either through live connections or through that this will be uploaded or into the data lake itself. We see, of course, that the main kind of sorry, you lost me there for a bit. I hope you can hear me. Can someone just give me a nod on that one?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, and let me just getting back to my presentation as well. So then all should probably be good. There we go. Yes, are we okay with the presentation as well?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So sorry about that little interruption. So basically on the qualitative data side, as I was mentioning, that deep, of course, being one part that we would like to promote further into the Joint Analysis Workspace. Of course, it can also be other third-party tools as well, like, for example, NVivo, etc., and so on, that you will be able to structure the qualitative data as to be able to then to utilize it in JAWS. On the other side as well, we will then bring in quantitative data. And that is, as I said, where I see it as a super system to deep, as deep is only focusing on qualitative data, even though that you can actually in the latest version with the reporting module that we have, bring in simpler Excel data sets with some quantitative data as to inform your report, but not really included into the analysis. But on the quantitative data side, we obviously then will be working with the custodians in the humanitarian sector on data. And we are looking at particular now, as we have now focused on the use case for the Joint Intersectoral Analysis Framework. We are then looking at the HPC tools as being one of the main data custodians that we would like to include. We have, of course, the population cards that needs to be there. We also is working closely with the HGX and their recent, so to speak, work on setting up a structured database that most likely will be through the humanitarian API, the HAPI, that you also have the chance to hear more about during next week. We will also ensuring that we're getting data directly from primary data, so to speak, even though it will be secondary for the ones doing the analysis, but both from REACH and also from DTM, as to be able to bring in more detailed information. And of course, as well, you can also utilize your own information that is coming directly from COBO, for example, or ad hoc data sets. We will always be in a situation that we will have data coming in different type of Excels and other type of document formats that will not be sitting on any other platform, or in that sense can be brought in through an API directly. Our vision here is as much as possible that we will have those live connections and be able to do a lot of the, so to speak, standardization and making the data interoperable through using API as well as to, so to speak, restructure the data into the standards that we are using inside JAWS. On top of that as well, we're bringing in expert input, as was mentioning, in the process, in the analysis process as well, as such, and also structured expert judgment. And then we will have an output as the joint analysis. All of this can then also be exported, of course, and it can either be through API, so it go directly out to back, for example, to the HPC tools, or it could also be going to snippets into certain other online reporting portals, for example, but of course it can also be a full report that is coming out as a PDF that can be shared directly. So in that sense is that the idea here is we can go from the beginning, from basically the data has been collected all the way to the report after that analysis. And we will do that through then bringing in the different expertise that is needed during the time as you're doing your analysis, as we will see in a moment. And the way that we're building it is that we are basing it on a number of different use cases, as trying to get a quite extensive breadth of the type of use cases that we have. as to ensuring that we are thinking of this, the requirements for as many use cases as possible, rather than we're doing it very narrow and then it can only be utilized for one type of use case. So doing that, we are then seeing how we can ensuring that we can bring in, of course, the Joint Intersectoral Analysis Framework that we will hear more about today. We are also wanting to include the UNDRR risk analysis that at this point in time have a step-by-step step approach towards doing analysis today that, for example, is informing their HNO on the risk side in certain contexts. They are at this point in time working quite a lot with qualitative data, and they would like to ensure that they can then, through this process, be able to include more quantitative data. We're also seeing how we can support informed warning, which is the newest tool or platform in the informed series after the informed risk and informed severity. And as that will be a way of having more dynamic alerts and also doing understanding the impact of those risks, then the last step in the JAWS will then be able to do much more detailed analysis as to understanding the severity of that and more curated analysis for the informed warning. We also then bring in the different perspective, as this is more intersectoral and supporting the larger system, but also then ensuring we can support more specific organizations. And that could be, of course, we have few that we're looking at right now, but there can be any other organizations in the future as the platform will be open to use. DRC, for example, is looking at to see how they can measure change using the platform. And then we as well is looking how we can support NRC with analysis support, basically all the way from needs analysis until program design. So that means that we will also have an element of prescription included into our analysis model. And then as well, to get a more sectoral approach towards it, we also seeing how we can support the GPC, the Global Protection Cluster, with protection analysis. And for me, that is a particular specific use case as well, because it's then have the possibility to bring in COBO for more qualitative primary data, for example, through focus group discussion, etc. as well. So that will be integrated into that use case. So based on those use cases, we have now then established kind of a global requirements for the system that then will be possible to bring in that. In the process as well, right now, we're also then working with a stakeholder group, the JAWS project group, that then is consisting of use owners, some of those custodians of data, but also some other stakeholders, donors, and others that's sitting in the deep governance board. And I'll just go back there. So, and basically here you can see that we are doing this over a 2 years period, and we are right now in the situation where we have established a JAWS analysis flow. We have defined the use cases that we want to ensure that we integrated into that, and now we are doing the final steps on the methodology that is underpinning JAWS. And then we will aim to have set up what we call a JAWS Lite by October this year, with field test after that. And the JAWS Lite will basically have all the functionalities of the workspace, while the underpinning data lake will not yet, so to speak, be fully up to scratch and up and running at this point in time. We will, in parallel with this, also then starting and working with other actors to setting up the data standardization process to ensure the interoperability and the data exchange. And I think that is specific of interest to ensure on the quantitative data side that we have so many that is involved in quantitative data. And then based on that, we will be able then to establish a JAWS with the data lake during the next year, with the aim of having it up and running by July, and then we will do the pilots and then scaling it after the end of the project in October 25. So that is the kind of the time frame that we're working within in this project. And today we're going to look into a bit more to the Joint Intersectoral Framework for JIAF, and as you can see on this time frame, that we are then is aiming to have it up and running for not this season for the HPC, but the following season. We will do the field test in the end of November, beginning of January. Then, of course, taking in any, so to speak, lessons learned and things that we need to, so to speak, adjust to making it work. And then it will go into the overall JAWS development and then the rollout by around July next year. So that is kind of the time frame that we are working within. I would assume most of you are kind of familiar with the Joint Intersectoral Analytical Framework, but you will also have more information about that in a moment. And Anna Maria will take you through how this will is foreseen to be working together. So basically the analysis flow that we then is having as underpinning this is looking like what you have on the screen right now, basically going all through the design stage, all the way to the communication. Where we are collating and preparing the data, and then of course having the analytical steps, description, explanation, interpretation, and also anticipation. And having in mind, as you can see here, is kind of rolling in a kind of a forward way, but of course it's always is an iterative process when you're doing any analysis. So that means that when you're coming to the description stage, you should easily then go back and changing the scope of your analysis, for example, in the design phase, etc. So that will obviously be that. The other thing that it will allow for the system is to have different type of user roles. Of course, you do not need to have all of those roles to be able to run the system. One person can have a different type of roles and supporting it. But basically the idea is as well that we can bring in experts where they are relevant, subject matter expert or country expert, so to speak, where they have a specific, instead of that they need to understand the full platform in itself. So that means that we might want to bring them in interpretation or anticipation stage at that time. And for example, already in prescription, we rather maybe want to already there bringing in our decision makers as well. So they are part of the analysis that is coming out. Also having in mind that we can see that we're having the all the way to the prescription, but of course, it could also look different for different type of use cases. So for example, for JIAF, in their analysis flow, they will go all the way to interpretation, but they will not be specifically going into anticipation or prescription as such, but so they will go then straight to the communication phase. Having said that as well, it also the way that they are working with the different type of steps or modules that they have is that, for example, in the first module, they will start in design, going all the way up to the description. But then when they have done that description, they will need to go and revisit the scope of the analysis and then, so to speak, move forward again. And then similar as well, when they're coming to the interpretation stage in module 3, they will for sure also need to be able to go to back and then redo part of the description, etc. So as I was saying, trying to kind of visualize this with the iterative way that we are working in the system. So this is how we are seeing the system at this point in time. We have, of course, as you understand, I mean, a process that is ongoing right now, and as I'm mentioning, we do have a session already next week that you're welcome to join us to get a bit more kind of flavor to what I'm talking about here. Of course, it's still not an existing system, but that also means that you can also influence requirements. So in that sense, that is this something that might be of interest for you? You can always contact me directly. You will have the information to contact in the end of the presentation. I will of course also send this out to you later on and have it on the HMPW platform. And then as well, we have, so to speak, the project group that is helping us setting up those requirements. Having said that, I will hand over to Anna Maria now, and then we can have time for some question and answers afterwards. So over to you, Anna Maria.
Thank you, Cecilia. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Ana Maria Pereira. I work with OCHA here in Geneva, and I've been working with the development of JIAF 2.0 for the last 2 years and a half already. So the JIAF is a methodology for us to analyze the needs of populations affected by crisis, but it's not only a methodology, it also provides process in this, let's say, the steps that we should follow to do this joint analysis process. So it's both an analysis method and a process for doing the joint analysis. And the objective of JIAF is to inform the humanitarian response plans, meaning that the results of the analytical process of the JIAF, it will appear often in a document that's called Humanitarian Needs Overview or Humanitarian Needs and Response Plan document. So the aim of this methodology is to respond to a few analytical questions, let's say, which are how many people are in need, where are they living, which geographical areas, what population groups are more vulnerable or more affected by the crisis, what's the severity of the needs of the different the people affected, which aims to help us to prioritize people for assistance by identifying the severity of their needs. And also, of course, this analysis process explains and describes what's the context where the shock happened, what different types of shocks or crises impacted the population, especially in more complex crises. We often have different overlapping crises, let's say, and then what are the needs that people are facing and other information that are relevant to explain the needs and the situation and help the prioritization and the planning of the response. So that, with that said, just going to talk briefly on JIAF for those who might not know the methodology. Very briefly, the JIAF methodology is designed around 3 different modules. What we see here on the screen are the modules that compose JIAF. So they both have elements of an analysis method, and as I said, is kind of a process. So these different modules, they often happen, they should happen in a sequence. So you start by looking in the starting point of your analysis is to have like multi-partner or workshop or a meeting where the analysis team, the intercluster coordination group, they will start discussing the context relevant information, what are the shocks that are relevant to this crisis, what are the impacts that people are facing from the shocks, what are the most vulnerable groups, etc. So this would be mostly kind of a qualitative analysis and written in a narrative form that's done at the beginning. The recommendation that OCHA would actually do this pre-analysis and then bring it to the workshop. And then in the workshop, the analysis team, the intercluster coordination group would discuss what is relevant, provide inputs. And one important outcome of this conversation is to establish the scope of the analysis. So at this point, you would define what are the more relevant, let's say, themes or shocks for your analysis. And also it has implications on the geographical coverage of your analysis and what administrative level you would like to disaggregate your figures. So at this point, that's why Cecilia said that there is a kind of feedback loop, because we have to do the whole module 1 and do some preliminary analysis already and discussing the shocks and the impacts. And then we will have the final decision, what's the scope of the analysis. So we have to go back to the design step of the, in JAWS, we'd have to go back to the design step to define these elements and then continue with the analysis process. So then we have the second step. Once we have agreed on the scope, the most relevant shocks, then we go to the module number 2, which is the sectoral needs. And the sectoral needs process is mostly processes that are, let's say, another analysis process within each of the clusters that are involved in the analysis of the needs. So this, most of this analytical process would happen outside of JAWS, or at least outside of the JIAF process in JOS. They could also be using JOS for doing their own sectoral analysis, but that would be a separate process. We might discuss this a bit later. But during this in this module 2, the clusters, they do their analysis in terms of number of people that are in need and number of people and the severity of the needs of these people in need, according to their sectoral point of view or a methodology. So if you are health cluster, you have a certain methodology, certain indicators that are using and measuring how many people are in need in health. If you are food security, you will use some maybe different criteria, indicators, and you're going to estimate how many people are in need of assistance related to food security. So in this point here, they do their own analysis. They also have to directly related to JIAF. They have to indicate how their PIN methodology and their severity methodology align to certain parameters or standards, global standards. So that's why you see here in a box, 2 boxes that mention interoperability. So there are some criteria that they have to indicate if their methodology to estimate PIN aligns or is interoperable with the standard methodology. And the sectoral severity also, they have to inform their methodology and if it aligns to the severity classification criteria. Once they have calculated that their people in need and severity figures, they share this information with OCHA, and then we move into the module number 3, which is where we do really the most substantive analysis, especially in terms of calculating the number of people in need and the intersectoral severity. So basically, the number of people in need and intersectoral severity are based on the estimates made by the clusters, which through a aggregation process, let's say, we bring together those figures, and then we establish this preliminary number of people in need and preliminary classification, severity classification by geographical area. Then starts a process of a real process of joint analysis, where through a series of meetings or workshops, the intercluster coordination groups, the IM working group, they will work together to review these figures and to, let's say, to analyze more in depth, especially some areas that are identified as, let's say, needing some more to be scrutinized, to be analyzed more in detail. So this joint analysis process would be something we call a convergence of evidence, where you bring the clusters, bring in their evidence for why their figures are as they are, why their severity classification is as it is, what information or evidence they have that sustains those numbers. And also there are some other indicators that are brought in, especially for the severity. And then through these meetings and discussions, the objective of this process is to arrive to an understanding, a common understanding of an agreement also, what is the current number of people in need in the country, what is the severity in the different geographical areas. And so having this convergence of evidence and have this joint process that would culminate, let's say, with a final number of people in need and a final classification of severity, intersectoral severity by geographical level. And also in this module 3, we have an element that's called needs and patterns, where you also aim to do some more, let's say, explanatory analysis and to discuss more correlations and linkages between different sectors. And let's say, what these figures that we have, what are they telling us? What is the story behind this? How they help to explain the humanitarian situation in the country, etc. So I think we can move to the next slide. I think here we don't have to spend a lot of time. It's just the same 3 modules, just presented as in a sequence or in a process with the activities and outputs. In the first module, we recommend to have at least one meeting, this initial meeting, to discuss the preliminary analysis, the shocks, the impacts identified, and then the main output is the agreed scope of the analysis, and have this preliminary analysis and identify what's the unit of analysis that will be used by everyone for estimating pain and severity. Then the second module, there will be activities related to data collection and the sector-specific analysis, and then the outcome, the main outcome is the sectoral figures that will come to compose the final figures, the joint intersectoral figures. And then in the third module, so the activities, as I said, are mainly joint analysis workshops or work sessions that will be done by the whole intersectoral coordination group and people involved in the analysis. And the outcomes, or the outputs would be having a intersectoral PIN figure, intersectoral severity, and some narrative that will fit into the humanitarian needs overview. Next, please. So looking into the, let's say, the JIAF analysis flow within JAWS. So for the first module, in the design phase, we would have basically creating the JAWS project and creating an analytical framework that's based on the JIAF model. So most of the parameters are standardized on JIAF. So there is a little space for adapting, but most of the framework is standardized. And then if there is, for example, because we work in many countries that do this analysis process in a yearly basis, so you could probably import data from the previous year and some of the parameters that were used in scope of analysis of the previous year, preload that, review, and then continue. Then next one is the collate part. So again, you could import the data that was already in the analysis of the previous year, especially in this protracted crisis, long-term crisis. Often the context is not going to be very different from one year to another. And the shocks also, they might not be very different from one year to another. You just need to update this information. So it would be relevant to import previous years and then connect to other websites, sources of information, such as the Relief Web. And also assess the availability of shocks and impact indicators that could be helpful for the analysis, and upload any other relevant ad hoc data sets. At this point, as I said, is mostly this module is mostly about narrative and qualitative analysis. There is not a lot of figures that come in this point, so the figures will start coming in later. The prepare step, so we would list the preliminary points or relevant information related to the context, review the initial description of the shocks and impacts, and prepare this description of the impacts and the needs of the specific population groups. And as I said, this would be mostly a step done by OCHA in preparation. Then next one. So then of course, in this joint discussion, joint workshop, the clusters and other members of the analysis group would provide some of their inputs, and then they would agree, let's say, on what are the relevant context elements and what are the shocks that are relevant, and the population groups, and agree on this scope of analysis. So at the end of this step, we would have an initial descriptive analysis and narrative, basic narrative. Then we have the module 2. As I said, in the module 2, most of the work will be done outside of what we could consider the JIAF process, or the JIAF analysis flow. But there are a few things that are relevant for the module 2. One of them is that because in the previous module we agreed on the scope of the analysis. So before the clusters can upload their figures, etc., we need to review the scope of analysis and especially the geographical areas that we're going to be using for the pin estimates, etc. So this would be a design step that's kind of linked to the sectoral needs part. And then we have, let's say, as a light collate and prepare, in the sense that once the clusters finalize their sectoral analysis, they will upload their pin and severity calculations and the methodologies that they used, because they also required to upload the methodology. And then they have to assess in the tool what is their level of alignment to those criteria of interoperability that I mentioned before. So that it's more light. As I said, the sectoral analysis is not directly part of the JIAF processes, but it's an option for the clusters. It would be an option for the clusters to do their analysis using JAWS, and that, of course, that could facilitate even for us to then import information from their workspaces back into the JIAF analysis workspace. Next, and then here, in relation to the steps of the intersectoral needs, the module number 3. So we would, in this point here, we would be more into starting to collating information. So the pin and the severity figures are most likely going to be uploaded into the HPC tools from what I have discussed so far. So they will be uploaded to HPC tools. Therefore, JAWS will have to access the HPC tools and bring in this information, and then we can connect to other relevant data sources or import some data sets, because in the JIAF we also use some indicators, we call them outcome indicators, to compare to the results of the severity, the preliminary severity, so they could be imported from a different data source. And then we have the, let's say, preparation stage, where we would have an estimation of the preliminary severity and preliminary pin figures. We also use in the methodology some dashboards. One is called the linkage and trends dashboard, where we look into the figures themselves. So we look into what are the geographical areas with the highest pin, what are the geographical areas with highest severity, if there are correlations between different clusters in terms of the magnitude of their pin. And then we have another one that's called the flag analysis dashboard, which is, the flags are a mechanism, let's say, that we have to support the analysis of different figures, and that help to indicate which areas we should prioritize for revision in this joint analysis of pin and severity figures. So there's also a dashboard that we are developing for the analysis of the flags, to help them to manage and resolve different flags, and then jointly agree on the final results. So these are elements that need to be prepared within JAWS or maybe outside JAWS. Then in the description element, then some relevant activities would be related to demonstrate patterns, trends, or contrasts with the information that is in the dashboard. It maybe identify patterns on the flags, and then we would go to the next step, which is the explanation. So in the explanation step, we will discuss the preliminary severity and pin results through the workshops. We will review these pin and severity figures. So this process can be in a loop, that you do the discussions, and then you go back to recalculating figures, and then rediscuss the results until you can reach a solution. And then, you can agree on the adjustments required. And then the interpretation element is, especially in this box that in the third module that's called needs and patterns, you could look into agreeing what are the priority issues, what are the priority areas, what areas seem to be more relevant for the response. So we would kind of write and rank the key findings of your analysis and the, let's say, analytical statements that would be used to feed into the HNO and to support, of course, the response decisions. And then, yeah, the review and finalize also the interpretation phase. You would also go back to look into the context, shocks, and impacts, and finalize that narrative element. And then the last step would be communicating, which can be either through exporting these results of the analysis directly into HPC tools, maybe in the future generating kind of digital HNRPs, or currently we have also mostly PDF HNRP, so extracting the results of the analysis and presenting them in the form of a humanitarian needs and response plan document. So I think that's what we had for the JIAF processes. Back to you, Cecilia.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna Maria. So basically you can see here that is an integration of JIAF into JAWS in that sense. And the idea is, of course, that JAWS can, as was outlined here by Anna Maria, you have a workshop and it's supporting, so to speak, could be a physical workshop, but it can also then support that you're doing it a bit more online. So that means that people can then input to that in different, so to speak, time frames, if that would be, so there's another option as to be able to design it in different ways. But it can also, as I said, support a workshop situation as well. And also just to go last on the communication part that Anna Maria was mentioning is, of course, that we can export the snippet, so it's going into another platform, but it's also a possibility in the future that basically the HNRP more or less is produced inside JAWS, and that means that then this will be integrated into that. So the way that JAWS is that it has a workspace for each, so to speak, project that is inside there. But for example, for the JIAF in a certain country, then it will be that you're doing it on a frequency of 1 year. So which means then, of course, next year, you will then just open it up and say, now I continue. So you basically then can continue from the same workspace that you have last year. But it also means that, for example, if a cluster is doing, like GPC is doing their own protection analysis, which also include the pins, etc., that is needed for the JIAF, then it can be seamlessly merged up into the JIAF workspace for that country. And similar, of course, that the information from JIAF can also be utilized for other projects, other workspaces on that same platform, as well as it is key figures that in the humanitarian response probably be reused by many of us other actors, so to speak. So that's how we sort of foresee that we are basically creating an ecosystem of those workspaces that is supporting each other to some extent as well. And when the data lake is in place, then we will also have that library. So which means, of course, that you can access what is public data. Of course, we have a strong data governance component towards it and the possibility to have classified data there, but public data can then be, so to speak, reused and called upon from another workspace as to build further on that information. So with that,
let me add something,
yeah,
Cecilia, just to remember, because you mentioned also the expert analysis. And there are, especially I think in the explain part, there is often some expert judgment exercises that are done in country, particularly evaluating the severity of the needs in different geographical areas by people that often work in those areas. So I think this also element of expert judgment would be important from the JAWS to support the analysis process.
Yeah, no, definitely to say, and we basically complement to the data when we might not have data in certain places, so that we can complement with expert judgment. Absolutely, yes. Okay, so I see we have some 10 minutes left, so maybe we'll open up for any questions and see if anyone has question for either on the JAWS or on the JIAF 2.0 as well. So Valeria, have you a possibility to see if there's any questions?
We have a hand from Hussam Said.
Yes, Hussam.
No. Great to see you. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, Cecilia and Anna Maria. Great to see you again. I don't know how much happened where I was not part, so I feel like I missed some because now I'm a little bit confused. Which platform we are speaking about what things happen in which platform? So this is one question. Is this in deep everything here, or there is other platforms where people are working? I didn't catch that. I liked a lot what the sector specialist. It's amazing. I know it might be happening before, but if not, this is a wonderful idea, especially when the sector specialty comes into the analysis and to decide on the needs, priority, and severity. Because information management, we are not doctors to decide on health or other things. So this is a wonderful, and it shows also accountability, this comparison between standards and what's happening. But I'm thinking also each context is different. Is there a time frame for each action? And what if somebody delayed? Does this delay the whole process, or we move without something, or how the work around that would be happening? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for the question, Hussam. We like to just give you a lot of acronyms and thinking that will be easy to understand the deep and JAWS and JIAF, and then that's easy, but no. So the way that we're seeing it, the relation between deep and JAWS, as deep as you know, Hussam, is very much focused on only qualitative data, and it also have certain other features, etc., and so on. It's very project-based, etc., and so on. So as we have seen the need to expand and also including quantitative data and expert judgment, it was of course a choice that we will build directly on deep and saying just another module to deep in that sense. But the way that we see it is that we would like to ensure that this new platform or new system, which will have its own entry point, but it will be very closely related to deep. So that means it can be seamless. If you're working on a deep project, you can basically just say, I would like to continue and also do joint analysis, bringing in quantitative data, and then you will seamlessly be, so to speak, working in JAWS. And that's like it was a module in deep. But on the other hand, we also have other actors that is not using deep as a starting point. So they will then be able to come in through the portal of JAWS. And then, of course, they can bring in the data they want to do. And if they also would like to then go and do more structured qualitative work, then they can, so to speak, expand and then do that inside deep, therefore support on that one. So you could see it as an extension to deep in that sense, but still being a standalone portal, so you can basically work. It will also have a bit different logic in the back end, particularly ensuring that we are sharing the data sources as much as possible. So we're building a real, so to speak, repository or data lake in that sense. So it's not only locked to that specific project or workspace, it can then be accessed by others as well. Again, as long as it is not set as sensitive or classified in any way. So then obviously it's only accessible for those that is owning that workspace. So hope that clarify your question there. Then I will hand over to you, Anna Maria, when it comes to the time frame, because I think that's directly related to JIAF, because obviously any other workspaces you set up your own time frame, but JIAF, of course, they have a commitment to to deliver for the HPC process.
Thank you, Cecilia. Yeah, in terms of the timeline, of course, there is a recommended timeline for to deliver the humanitarian response plans. So we expect the JIAF to be aligned with that global timeline, but of course there is flexibility among the countries to when they start the process and when they finish the process. So in that sense, there is flexibility among the countries, but within the country, then they have to follow certain deadlines, let's say. So you decide to start your joint analysis process with the module 1, let's say in June, July, and you agree to do this in joint meetings and do it together. And then most importantly, you agree on a deadline for the clusters to finish their sectoral analysis, because until we don't receive the sectoral inputs in terms of people in need, in severity of needs, we cannot start module 3. So everyone needs to finish the module 2 so that we can start the module 3. So in that sense, the process in the country there's no flexibility in this sense, like because you need to follow those deadlines so you can proceed to next steps.
I hope that clarified for you, Hassan.
Very clear. Thank you very much. Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so anyone else have any reflection, question?
I see something on the chat, I think was about there's one. Yes, sorry. The main differences between JAWS Lite and the one that will be launched in 2025.
Yes. So basically what we'll do is that in the first place, we will ensuring that we are establishing the, so to speak, the interface itself, so it can do the analytical task that we wanted to do. And that's what we are going to be focusing on in this first instance during 2024. And then during the next year has to be really functional, and particular when it comes to be able to absorb many, and when hopefully it's getting more and more workspaces on JAWS, we need to be able to establish the data lake. We will start working on that already, but we also foresee that being a longer standardization period that is needed, discussion with different partners, etc., as to aligning our data sets, making more interoperable, etc., and also aligning to the process that HTX at this point in doing with humanitarian API as well. So then we will then focus on including, so to speak, the data lake that is underpinning JAWS. So I would say that this first year of the JAWS Lite, there might be more work for the data manager to ensuring that the data set is fitting to the format that is needed in JAWS, while later in 2025, then you will have support to be doing that, and a lot of it will be coming in through connectors and API, etc., and so on. So that is the main differences between the two. So, so basically the analysis part will be functional in the end of 2024, while with the full support of the data lake from 2025.
Thanks, Cecilia. If I may take this, there's one question from Elizabeth. Hi, Elizabeth. So this is, could you say something about the transition from the current JIAF analysis platform to JAWS? When will the analysis platform stop being used in favor of JAWS? So for this year, we have, so for those who don't know, for this, since last year, we have a different analysis platform for JIAF that's running. It was used last year, and our plan is to use the same analysis platform for the HPC 2025, because the JAWS will not be ready by June, and we need to have a platform that's available in this June. And then, so every country will be using for HPC 2025, and towards the end of the year, when we have the first version of the JAWS Lite, we'll have some pilot countries, as Cecilia had presented before in the timeline. So basically, the full adoption of JAWS for the JIAF analysis will be for the next year, 2026 HPC process.
And then I also see there was a question here about it, if it is recorded, the session, and yes, it is recorded, and it will be available on the HMPW, and we will also make them available on a YouTube channel. So we will send information out to this group as well. Okay, any last comments, questions? I hope it was useful and it was understandable. It's always difficult to sell a vision that is not already, so to speak, in place. But I hope that you followed the logic that Anna-Maria and I was trying to describe. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. And I hope to see you, many of you, next week at the HMPW.